On Monday night, the ABC's respected Four Corners program aired a report on Nauru that claimed in part that Australia's regional processing of refugees there amounted to torture. The ABC's since been heavily criticised for using old footage of facilities and has said that's because it's almost impossible for journalists to get access to Nauru. Well, that's true. But everyone knows that A Current Affair was granted unrestricted access earlier this year, and we devoted a full program to showing you the current conditions, talking to refugees and to Nauruan authorities. We don't know why Four Corners didn't use and acknowledge our up-to-date material in their report. We have certainly followed up excellent stories that they've covered in the past with due accreditation, and will no doubt do that in the future. Carolyn Marcus was our reporter who travelled to Nauru.
It's hot. The houses are so bad. Nauru's so bad. We don't want to go anymore there.
You don't want to go to Australia?
Yeah.
Well, it's death by slow torture. The place is set up to make people go mad.
Let me put it this way, they're well looked after.
It's quite a violent culture, and it's not a safe space to be operating in on a daily basis.
Our crime rates are actually very low compared to Australia. We are much lower than you in Australia, I'm sorry to say.
Hello and welcome to Four Corners.
The story was called The Forgotten Children, a public broadcaster boasting about securing secret smuggled footage from Nauru.
TV crews and journalists are rarely allowed to visit Nauru.
Except we were.
What sort of refugees stay at this centre?
Refugees, they'll be the family units, single adult males.
A Current Affair visited the tiny island nation just 4 months ago.
Hi there.
The first and only television crew to film the processing centres and to speak directly with refugees there, including children. And we certainly didn't sugarcoat their stories when we broadcast an entire program devoted to conditions on the island.
Do you go to school here?
It's bad. They spit in our lunch, they throw our lunch, they fight us, they pull our hair, they do everything to us. But the principal say, I don't care, to go and tell to your principal.
Some told us they no longer wanted to come to Australia because of their treatment on Nauru.
We don't want to go anymore there.
You don't want to go to Australia?
Yeah.
In contrast, ABC's Four Corners did not travel to Nauru, instead featuring interviews with children that are believed to have been filmed by refugee activists and passed on to the broadcaster.
This is Misbah and Shamim. They've both been recognised as refugees.
The story opens with footage of 2 young girls behind a cyclone fence, even though, like 80% of refugees on Nauru, they don't live in the processing centres but out in settlements in the community. And as our story showed, those still in the centres are free to come and go as they please.
They say they feel like they're in prison, but the confusing thing is they're free to walk out of the camp at any time.
I mean, they're not locked up there, but they take pictures behind the fence, and after putting, taking pictures, and then they walk out, free to move around the island.
Thank you for having us.
In his first television interview, Nauru President Baron Wanga told A Current Affair that type of imagery is a deliberate move to whip up anti-offshore processing sentiment in Australia.
I was like, oh, we're going to Norway.
The first Four Corners interview is with a 17-year-old refugee from Burma who says she was scared to go to Nauru because of cannibals.
And then I feel like they're gonna eat me. I was so young and I was like, Mom, I'm so scared.
Well, it's death by slow torture. The place is set up to make people go mad or make people die inside.
You know what?
The program also featured interviews with no fewer than 5 former members of Save the Children, an aid organisation that left the island a year ago. They showed supplied pictures of toilets stained with feces and footage of a rundown hospital. but declined to show the upgraded schools and hospital that the Australian government has spent millions on.
It's not a safe space to be operating in on a daily basis, physically or emotionally. You see scary things, and you're not safe.
To illustrate claims that refugees are not safe on Nauru, Four Corners ran old YouTube footage of locals brawling.
Between Nauruans, public fighting is par for the course. Now that refugees have moved into the community, they've become targets for violence.
We're talking about attacks with machetes, people being hit with metal bars, people being thrown off their motorcycles, thrown off the cliffs, people sustaining very serious injuries.
Amnesty International's Anna Neistat was also part of the broadcast, which had been timed to coincide with a new report from the human rights group out that very day.
We're going to go to our next question. It's a video from Dr. Anya Neistat.
Coincidentally, she'd also appeared on the ABC's Q&A a week earlier, when the topic was entirely centred on Nauru and offshore detention.
I was recently in Nauru, and I have to say that the situation for refugees there is one of the worst I've seen in my life.
Do you still want to live in Australia? Would you like to come to Australia? Not only did the ABC again fail to even mention a Current Affairs 30-minute report, when I tweeted Q&A during their live broadcast, raising concerns with the claims, my name was removed from my post in a further refusal to acknowledge a Current Affairs visit to Nauru. Unsurprisingly, the Four Corners story has attracted widespread criticism over the past 24 hours.
I'm not in a position to tell you.
ABC executives were grilled in the Senate yesterday over the story.
So it wasn't filmed by a journalist from Four Corners.
You think they're ready?
Comedian Dave Hughes joined the chorus of critics.
Well done, Four Corners, on using random YouTube clips of blokes punching on to imply every Nauru local is a sadistic animal. #ethical.
Immigration Minister Peter Dutton says activist journalism can make life harder for refugees.
These advocates are dressed up as journalists, frankly, at the ABC, Guardian and some parts of Fairfax are compounding these people's problems because they're telling them don't accept settlement packages.
Meantime, the Nauru government has released a statement regarding Monday night's story, saying this report was an embarrassment to journalism. From start to finish, it was denigrating, racist, false and pure political activism.
The damage is done for these children. It is done. I just want to make sure it doesn't happen to another generation.
For the record, we are not suggesting and have never suggested Nauru is a great place for children. It's clearly not, and resolving their future has to be a priority for the Australian government.